Thank you everyone for taking out time and joining today's session. Let's get started with the session today. I'm your host Roshan, speaking here. In today's session, we'll be talking about how you can improve your cloud profitability with Microsoft Azure. The key takeaway for today's session is you will find out ways of how you can upsell and cross-sell Microsoft Azure to your existing customers. You will see how there are scenarios where you can go ahead and plug in Azure to existing Office 365 or M365 customers. You can also see how you can cross-sell uh, Microsoft Azure to either existing or to new customers that you onboard onto your portfolio. That's the key takeaway that you will see in today's session. A quick agenda run. We'll go through the cloud service model. I'm sure most of you already know about it. We'll have a brief introduction about Office 365 and Microsoft 365, and then we'll deep dive into how can I go ahead and introduce Azure to my existing customers. How can I plug into something that they're already using, or how can I do a cross sell of Azure to something that they're already running in their on-premise infrastructure. So we'll look at some of the questions that you can ask, some of the scenarios where you can identify if Azure is a suitable opportunity, or is there a suitable replacement for what they are using today. And at the end, we'll also have a presenter from Microsoft, Sylvia, who will run you through a very unique program called as Microsoft Fast Track Program for Azure, and help you understand what this program is all about, how you can use Microsoft directly to help you with uh, certain activities on Azure, and how you can utilize them to win more deals and execute more projects successfully. So starting off with the cloud service model, I'm sure most of you are aware of these models. Cloud broadly has three services or as a service model: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Software as a service, Office 365, Gmail, Hotmail, these are the classic examples of it, where you do not need to manage and maintain anything. All you need to do is create user accounts for the service, and you can start using the service. You don't need to take care of patching the application, managing the servers behind it, or even the operating system, or even the hardware on which the application is running. All you need to take care is your data. uh, any data that you put onto any software as a service application is your responsibility. You have complete control and ownership of the data, and you only take care and manage your data which you put on it. Platform as a service is more like a web hosting as a service or database hosting as a service, where again you get access to the application itself, but you don't really get access to the operating system on which the application is running, or you don't get access to the virtualization layer on which your desired application is running. So platform as a service is a service where you can build your own applications using a cross-platform, using multiple languages, or you can use the out-of-the-box functionality which the cloud service providers provide, and use it to either host database, host website, run functions, etc. Infrastructure as a service has been more and more popular these days, where you can run your applications and have control over what operating system is running on. So right from the operating system level and above. So what applications you want to install, how you want to install, what data you want to store on the virtual machines, what kind of connectivity do you want to give it to the virtual machines. All this details are under your control. You can configure them, you can manage them, and give access to your customers via applications running on virtual machines. So that is where the traditional infrastructure as a service comes into place. uh, The normal on-prem infrastructure, I'm sure most of you know, this is a typical on-premise data center implementation where you have to take care right from the networking, storage, servers, virtualization, either VMware, Hyper-V, or KVM, and installation of the OS. So traditional on-prem has been there for probably multiple decades now. And once cloud as a business model started coming into picture, we saw the various as a service platforms which Microsoft has introduced. So let's look at some of the software as a service offerings from Microsoft, which has been there for quite some time. Office 365. I'm sure most of you know what Office 365 is. It was launched in the year 2001. It's a cloud-based subscription model offered by Microsoft, which gives you not only Microsoft Office apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, but it also gives you other advanced enterprise applications like Exchange or email service, SharePoint, which is collaboration service, Microsoft Teams, which is real-time collaboration and chat service, uh, which now also includes audio video conferencing. You have Planner, you have OneDrive, which is your personal storage, and it is available in various plans. You have a personal plan, you have business plan, you have enterprise plan, you have education plans, you have plans for non-for-profit. So this is what Office 365 is all about. I'm sure most of you have been using it, have proposed to your customers, and most of your customers are also using it. In this course of today's session, we'll see how you can plug in Azure to your existing Office 365 customers. For people who are not aware of what Microsoft 365 is, Microsoft 365 was released in 2017. It's a superset of Office 365. What I mean by that is it contains Office 365 plus Windows 10 plus Enterprise Mobility Suite, so Mobility and Security Suite. Right, so it has Office 365, all the plans of Office 365, plus it includes advanced security features like advanced threat protection. It includes identity management. It also includes Intune, which is your mobility management suite. It also includes a lot of identity features as well, right from Active Directory various plans, Azure Active Directory plans, and it includes a Windows 10 license, an upgrade license, which you can use either to upgrade your Windows 7 to Windows 10, or you could potentially use it in various other scenarios within Azure as well. Again, Microsoft 365 is the next wave of software as a service which Microsoft is pushing to the market. A lot of customers who have been using Office 365 are slowly transitioning to Microsoft 365 because it just gives you more functionalities, more features, and more security enhancement, which makes it more friendly and more is a more requirement for your customer. It is again available in two flavors. You have a business plan, you have an enterprise plan. You can mix and match like you used to do in Office 365 and propose to your customers. So as I said, M365 is on top of Office 365. So you get Office 365 plus additional features. One of the biggest benefits that you get with Microsoft 365 is the advanced security features, not just for your software as a service, but also for your device and mobility management as well. So if you're interested to know more about Microsoft 365, we have a dedicated person in our team by the name Andrew Brown. He is a National Business Development Manager. I've just put across his email address. You can make a note of it. You can get in touch with him if you have any opportunities, if you have any questions, if you want to know how to move from Office 365 to Microsoft 365, or if you want to know how you can go ahead and sell new Microsoft 365 plans to your customers, which plan is the right one, what features does it include, all these questions can be answered by Andrew Brown. So let's dive into the crux of today's session on how you can introduce Azure to your customers, how you can upsell Azure to your existing customers. So the first question that you should ask yourself and your customers is, how do your customers protect their data, which is on Office 365 or Microsoft 365? Right. So either in Office FIM 365, I'm sure most of your customers are using email, which is Exchange Server. They're using SharePoint or OneDrive. A lot of customers in the last 1 year have started using Teams, which is nothing but storing data, chatting, and conferencing, audio, video calls. So how do they actually protect this data? Because when you put data on a software as a service application, it is still your responsibility to take care of the data. Microsoft or most of the vendors who have a software as a service application follow a shared responsibility model, which means that you still need to protect your data which you upload onto SharePoint, upload onto OneDrive, the emails which you send across is still your data and you need to manage and maintain it. Microsoft definitely takes care of having the infrastructure up and running all the time so that you do not face any service interruption, but the actual data itself which you upload or send across using these platforms, you still need to manage them, because the data can get accidental deletion. You might have a rogue administrator who might delete data. You might have a ransomware attack which might go ahead and delete data. So because of all these external factors, you still need to make sure that you protect the data which is on Office 365 or Microsoft 365. It is very, very essential that you educate your customers about it and have a plan ready when, for example, if you have a ransomware, or if an employee leaves the company and he archives all the data, how do you actually recover this data? Right? You need to have a contingency plan for it. And that is where we are trying to introduce a solution where not just out of the box features. For example, this slide shows what are the out of the box protection that you have within Office 365. Most of these features, what I've seen partners and customers doing are they just leave it to default, which is just 30 to 60 days. You can definitely configure it up to 140 days, but very rarely do I see a partner investing time and money to do this. So what happens is when there is an accidental deletion, or an employee moving from, say, one organization to another, tends to remove all his data or archive all his data, copy it onto a drive, a USB, and then move on to the next company. And the previous company basically is in loss of all the data which the employee has taken. So how do you protect yourself? How do you protect your customers from this data leakage? So we have a solution from Veeam. Veeam offers a product called as Veeam Backup for Office 365. This particular solution fills the gap of what Office 365 does not offer. It can back up every service of Office 365, right? From email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, all the data which is stored by an organization, by the employees of the organization in Office 365, can be protected by this particular software. It's called Veeam Backup for Office 365. So how do you actually use it? Veeam Backup for Office 365 is an install based software, which means you have to install it on a particular machine. It can be an Azure virtual machine, which is running Windows, let's say 2016 or 2019 operating system. Once you install on an Azure virtual machine, you can just configure the software to back up everything that you have on either Microsoft 365 or Office 365. Now, one of the advantage of installing and configuring it on Azure, it becomes a cloud to cloud service. So when you're backing up or when you're restoring, you do not need to use your network, your company's network, in order to pull and push the data. right? So you can directly access the virtual machine in Azure. The virtual machine can be running 24/7. It can be running 8/5, and you can recover the data. It also helps you meet your legal and compliance requirement. A lot of companies have a rule where they have to maintain at least 2 copies of their backup data, right? So this definitely helps you in making sure that you have multiple copies of your backed up data stored in different locations, right? So especially for your management, for your CEO, CIOs, it is very important to have multiple copies of the data, so that in case the data gets deleted accidentally, intentionally, or during if there is an external event like a hacking or a ransomware attack, you always have a backup copy, via which you can go ahead and restore your data. Now, how do you restore the data? Veeam offers something called as Veeam Explorer. Veeam Explorer is a free product. There's no charge for it. You can download this product either onto your laptop or on the same machine where Veeam Backup is installed. And this allows you to do granular restore. So you can restore an entire mailbox, a single attachment from an email. You can restore a bunch of emails, and emails can be imported in multiple ways or exported in multiple ways. You can export as a PST, or you can even have the software itself forward that email to another user. So all these various options are available within the software. If you do have any questions during the course of today's session, feel free to put them in the chat window. We will take up questions at the end of today's session, and hopefully answer all your questions at the end of today's session. One of the good parts about Veeam Backup for Office 365 is this product is also available as an MSP model. What do I mean by that? You can use one software, or you can use one installation of this software and provide backup as a service to multiple customers. So if you have, for example, in the scenario, 3 customers, you have a customer who is using on-prem Exchange, and you have 2 customers who are using, let's say, Office 365 or a combination of Office 365 and M365. You can provide backup as a service to all these 3 customers using Veeam Backup for Office 365. They will only see their own data. Of course, they will not see the data of another company. And when they try to restore, they can restore data of their own organization, and they can perform a granular recovery as well. Either they can perform it by themselves, or you as an MSP can help them restore the data. So we have different companies. We have been working with some MSPs who provide backup and restore as a service. There are customers who are mature enough, who have a big enough IT team, where the IT team itself can just connect to the backup as a service, which the MSP is providing, and they restore it by themselves. This is a very good revenue generation model where you can use the infrastructure of Microsoft Azure. So you get the benefit of Microsoft SLA of 99.99% running. You get the reliability of the storage which they provide. You get the uptime benefit, and you can use their data center as your own data center, devise a pricing model and propose it to your existing customers who are using Office 365 and M365. So you don't need to run you don't need to have an instance for each customer. You can have one instance for all your customers and provide them backup as a service. So it becomes a very cost-effective model even for your customer, because you're offering it at a cheaper or a better price than your competition, and at the same time they are able to connect and restore whenever they want any data which they feel is deleted. We also have another product offering from Ingram Micro called AppPoint. AppPoint has been a product which Ingram Micro has introduced about a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, where again AppPoint is a specialized platform which not only provides backup as a service functionality, but it also does migration. If you have customers who are currently evaluating moving from SBS server to Office 365, Microsoft 365. AvePoint can help you do that. If they are using a third-party email solution, like it's an email solution from GoDaddy, and they want to move to Office 365, Microsoft 365, again, AvePoint has the migration suite that can help you move the data. Apart from migration, it also offers you backup as a service functionality, very similar to what Veeam offers. But the major difference here is when it comes to backup as a service or migration as a service, it's a 100% software as a service offering, which means you don't need to install and configure AvePoint. It is already installed and configured in the cloud. All you need to do is create an account in AvePoint, connect to your Office 365, connect to the storage. So you can bring in your own storage like Azure storage, and you can have AvePoint backup everything which is there in Office 365 or M365 and store it onto the Azure storage which you bring in. Right, so it's a very fantastic product that we have seen a lot of success with. We have many customers and partners using AvePoint on a daily basis for backup, and we have a lot of customers who use them for migration as well. So a quick comparison of some of the well-known backup solutions in the market. Right, so I've included some of the other products as well, which I've seen in the market. Veeam is an install product. As I said, one of the good features of Veeam is it is not only something that you can install on Azure. Of course, we definitely recommend you to install on Azure, but all you need is a Windows Server machine for it. So if you do have customers who need to who have very strict legally and compliance policies, and they need to store one copy of data in their on-prem storage and another copy of the data on cloud, Veeam can still help you do that. Veeam can be installed on an on-prem server, configure it to back up your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 data, and the same software can also be used to push the data to an Azure storage. So Veeam offers both these functionalities, and most of the other features are very similar to what everybody else provides. So it depends on the flexibility that you have. For example, NetApp definitely allows you to take multiple backup, but it is fixed number of backups per day. So for example, NetApp allows you to take up to 4 backups per day, whereas Veeam or AvePoint, you can configure any number of backups. You can configure a backup every 5 minutes, for example, right? So there are slight differences between these products, but more or less most of them provide you a similar functionality. So the first offering that you can take to market to your existing Office customers is backup as a service for the data that they are using and running on, running on Office 365. The next way to introduce Azure is to ask a question: does your customer use remote desktop to access their applications? Do they have a terminal server infrastructure currently which they are using? Do they have an RDS setup? Or do you still have customers who would like to use Windows 7 even after January 14, 2020? I'm sure most of you are aware that post January 14th, 2020. So coming back to the slides, as I said, we can go ahead and ask our customers whether they would like to use or whether they are currently using desktop remote desktop infrastructure for their to access their applications, or do they want to continue to use Windows 7? If you do have customers who qualify or who fit into these two questions, then there's another offering that you can present to them, which is Windows Virtual Desktop. This has probably been the highest requested feature for the last 4 to 5 months that I've received. Windows Virtual Desktop is a desktop as a service functionality or an offering which Microsoft has introduced. It's the only Windows 10 multi-session offering that is available in the market. Neither Citrix nor VMware Horizon can actually offer you this particular experience or this particular offering just by using their platform. If this platform is the only replacement if your customer wants to use Windows 7 and wants to continue to get the extended security updates, which Microsoft has stopped from January 14th, 2020 onwards. So if you do have customers who have, let's say, developed custom application or have a proprietary application that only works on Windows 7 and they have not yet planned to upgrade it to a Windows 10, or they have not re-architected it, then you can definitely push their Windows 7 operating system onto Windows Virtual Desktop, or you can have their end users start using Windows Virtual Desktop as their primary desktop and have the application still running, and at the same time still get security updates from Microsoft. Windows Virtual Desktop is also very well integrated with Microsoft 365. In the upcoming slides, you'll see that you can potentially reuse some of the licenses which Microsoft 365 offers onto Windows Virtual Desktop. It offers you both pooled and personal desktop, so you can have uh, users who can get dedicated resources, and you can have users who get shared resources. It is very simple and easy to deploy. We have also onboarded a new vendor called Nerdio, who makes it more easier to deploy or automate the deployment of the entire Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure. So Ingram Micro is definitely putting a lot of efforts to make sure the partners have all the resources in hand to deploy and run a successful Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure. Customers who are eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop. So as I said, it is very tightly integrated with Office 365. So uh, I'm I'm sorry, it is very tightly integrated with Microsoft 365. So customers who are currently using these M365 licenses, whether they're using business, even or E3 license, they are very much eligible to go ahead and use Windows Virtual Desktop because they can reuse the Windows 10 license. Do remember, if your customer is using just Office 365, then he still needs to purchase a Windows 10 subscription license. Only if he's using Microsoft 365 will he be able to reuse his license when he deploys Windows Virtual Desktop. Right. So if you already have customers using this and are currently running an on-prem infrastructure for their application access via RDP or VDI or even remote app, then this is a very good upsell where they get the benefits of Windows 10 experience, whereas today they are probably logging on to a Windows Server operating system, and they get the benefits of using not just Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure. The service is connected to every other service which is available on Azure. So if they're running SQL as a service, they can have the desktops get connected to that via an application and get the uptime of what Microsoft Azure provides. Last week we did a webinar on Windows Virtual Desktop. In case you were not able to attend it, I've put the link on the slide. The slides will be shared with you post the session. I can go through this webinar where we have gone through a detailed walkthrough of how Windows Virtual Desktop functions, what are the components, how you can actually implement it, what are the various vendors who have automation tools which you can use. And we also have vendors on our cloud marketplace as well, which you can potentially use to go ahead and deploy Windows Virtual Desktop. I've also shown some examples of scenarios in terms of costing of how much it might cost for a 25 user organization, for a 30 user organization, if you do a typical Windows Virtual Desktop infrastructure implementation. So you can get all those ideas and information if you watch through this particular recording. The next question, now this is a more specific for certain customers only. This may or may not apply for a large customer base. If your customers use web-based application that use Active Directory for authentication and are also currently using Office 365 or Microsoft 365, what is the kind of solution that you can propose? what you could potentially go ahead and propose is you can actually enable single sign-on experience for them. They can have one username and password to access their on-prem application, which is a web-based application which is using Active Directory, and the same ID can also be used to log on to Office 365 as well. Now, this is provided by an application or a service called as Azure Application Proxy. Now, this is again a service which is available within Azure. All you need to do is just configure it. It is part of Active Directory P1 or P2 plan, and this provides you a single sign-on experience between your application, your custom-built web application that uses Active Directory for authentication, and any service which uses Azure Active Directory. It can be Office 365, Microsoft 365, it can be Dropbox, Salesforce. So you get a single sign-on experience between all these applications, something that is running on-prem or potentially running in Azure, and another software as a service application which also uses Active Directory for authentication. So this provides a really good end user experience where they don't need to remember multiple usernames and passwords to access different application. And the only requirement is that all the applications which the customer wants to use has to use either Azure Active Directory, or in simple terms just use Windows based Active Directory, because if it is using Windows based Active Directory for authentication, we can sync those credentials to Azure Active Directory and then have it have the same ID used across Microsoft applications and their on-prem applications. A very good selling point, because a lot of customers do not just use Office 365, they always have their own software. For example, they're using MyOb, they're using a third-party accounting software which uses Active Directory for authentication, and you can combine Office 365 with MyOb or with Salesforce to provide them a single sign-on experience. So these were some of the ideas, these are some of the questions that you can go back and ask your sales team or ask your customers, or evaluate whether your customers fit into these requirements. And if they do, you now have a potential upsell opportunity. You can build your own pipeline using these questions by just checking whether do they have a backup strategy for their Office 365, how do they back up their Office 365 data, are they using Windows Virtual Desktop? If they are, are they looking at moving to Office 365 or Microsoft 365, or are they looking to move to Azure? Do they use different applications but they use the same authentication provider? Just by asking these 3 to 4 questions with your existing customer base, you can start developing a pipeline which you can then track and follow up and build more business on it. Now, in the next coming slides, you'll see how you can introduce Azure, but not by just looking into their Office 365 and 365, but by slightly asking different set of questions. The very first question that you can ask is, which backup software does the customer use, or where do they store the backed up data? Right? I'm sure every customer today has a backup software to back up his application data. Right? There is hardly any customer that you'll come across in the market who doesn't have a backup software. Backup software is probably the very first thing the company typically implements as soon as they have some of their applications up and running. Microsoft Azure has integration with most of the popular backup softwares available in the market. It has integration with Veeam, with Veritas, with StorageCraft, with Micro Focus, Commvault, DoubleTake. Now, also, if you do have a customer who is not using a good software for backup, Microsoft Azure still has its own backup service called as Azure Backup, where it can back up both desktops or it can back up server and its associated data. Most of these backup vendors not only provide you integration with Azure Storage, they also provide you an MSP model similar to what I explained in Office 365, where you can have one installation of the software and provide backup as a service to multiple customers of Office 365. Similarly, for example, Veeam and Veritas and StorageCraft, they have an MSP model where you can just install Veeam instance once, and you can provide backup as a service to multiple Veeam or Veritas customers, right? So you can definitely build your own backup as a service offering to your customers, to existing customers who are using the software, and provide them backup on the cloud. Always remember, backup has to be done in multiple locations. Typically, in a backup industry, we talk about the 3-2-1 rule, which means you need to have 3 storage locations. One of them has to be offsite location, right? So uh, cloud is the most preferred offsite location because the storage can keep expanding, and storage in Azure is probably one of the cheapest service that you can offer. Just to give you an example, a terabyte of cold storage would just cost you a little over $10 to $12 per month, right, for 1 terabyte of data. So storage is definitely something that you can look into. You can integrate that with their existing backup software. So for a customer, he's not replacing his software licenses which he's already purchased. If he also has a storage box, then he can keep the first storage or the first copy of his backup data onto his primary storage, which is on-prem, and the secondary copy of the data can go onto cloud. Or if the customer is small, then you can actually push the primary backup data onto cloud itself. The primary storage can be the cloud storage itself. The next question that you can ask is, does your customer need a disaster recovery setup? Now, again, not all customers look at disaster recovery as a mandatory requirement, but if you have customers who are medium to enterprise, who have ERP applications, who have customers or users spread across multiple cities or multiple countries, if they have customers who are spread across multiple regions, who are geographically distributed, then typically they always would want to implement a disaster recovery setup, so that if their primary infrastructure has problems, they have a secondary infrastructure which can provide them which can provide access to the data which the customer is looking for. Now, Azure offers one of the best disaster recovery options by using a service called as site recovery. Now, this has probably been one of the most used service of Azure, where it not only offers disaster recovery for a physical infrastructure, it also offers disaster recovery for virtual infrastructure, which includes both VMware and Hyper-V. So if your customer is currently using, let's say, VMware infrastructure to host and run his applications, he doesn't need to build another VMware infrastructure in a secondary data center. He can just use Microsoft Azure Site Recovery to set up an on-demand disaster recovery site on Azure, and he only pays for Microsoft Azure the compute. He only pays for the compute of the Microsoft Azure only when his on-prem infrastructure goes off. Now, do remember, in Azure, the highest cost is always the compute cost. So you're actually paying the cost of running the virtual machine only when your on-prem machines goes off, and this holds true for both VMware, Hyper-V, or physical server, right? For Hyper-V and VMware, it provides both failover and failback option as well. So it is not just moving from on-prem to Azure. If, let's say, you have a disaster in your on-prem, you move to Azure, and if you're able to fix the issues in your on-prem, you can fail back from Azure to on-prem as well. So it's a very unique offering, a very cost-effective offering, something that you can propose for small, medium, and large organizations. And most of the features and functionalities are available out of the box within Azure. You would not require a third-party solution on top of this to achieve a disaster recovery setup. The next question is your customer looking at moving his applications to cloud? Right now, cloud has been in the market for a couple of decades now, And a lot of customers now, when they start a project or are thinking of revamping their infrastructure or introducing a new application, cloud is always one of the options that they're considering, right? It can be either with respect to hardware refresh, with respect to capacity expansion, disaster recovery, high availability, any of these scenarios, the customer always looks at cloud as one of the potential options. Now, if he's looking to move or migrate his applications to cloud, then Azure again has a dedicated service called as Azure Migrate. Azure Migrate is a service that not only migrates your application, but even before migration, it helps you with discovery and assessment of your applications. So it actually tells you which workloads are ready to move to cloud, which workloads are not ready to move to cloud. And it also helps you identify the workloads. Some of the large organization will have many applications which are very specific to certain departments, right? The IT may or may not be aware of all the applications which the various departments are using and running. So it helps you in discovery of all the applications, and it does an assessment. And to a certain level, it also gives you a costing estimate of if you move to Azure, what it might potentially cost you uh, in Azure as well. So it's a end-to-end service where it gives you details when you're trying to plan your movement from on-prem to Azure, and it also helps you in the actual migration of the infrastructure from on-prem to Azure. Azure Migrate also has integration with several ISV partners, which help you in deeper analysis of your application, deeper analysis of cost management, and it also provides you APIs which you could potentially integrate with some of the tools if you already have developed your own backup software, or sorry, if your own migration software, you can potentially integrate that with Microsoft Azure as well. One of the other questions which I'm sure a lot of partners today are asking is, does your customer still use Windows Server 2008 or SQL Server 2008 or 2008 R2? Now, both these two products have been already in end of support for a little over 6 months now. So a lot of customers who are using this software would very soon be a potential target for hackers and ransomware attacks, right? So as you see, July 9, 2019 has been the last date when Microsoft has stopped releasing security updates for SQL Server, and Windows Server it has been January 14th. So if your customers are using any kind of ERP application or SharePoint 2007, CRM 2007, which typically use SQL 2008 or 2008 R2, then they are a potential target for ransomware attacks, for hackers to get into your data and potentially expose the data over the internet. Now, if you do have customers who are using this software and who have currently have not budgeted to buy new software or buy new licenses of the latest SQL 2019 or Windows Server 2019, then they can actually move as is whatever they currently have as is. They can move to Azure, which means they can still continue to run Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2 or SQL Server 2008 or 2008 R2 on Azure and get free security updates for the next 3 years. So from July 9th, 2019 to July 9, 2022, they can continue to get security updates and patches. If they still want to run on-prem, there is an option to purchase the security updates, but it will cost them a lot of money. For example, a single Windows 7 desktop, if they want to license it, then this year it will cost them, for example, $100. The next year the same machine will cost them $200, and the third year it'll cost them $400. So Microsoft is basically doubling up the license cost every year for the next 3 years if they want to run on-prem. And now this cost is an example for a Windows 7 operating system. The cost is definitely higher for a server operating system such as a Windows Server or a SQL Server. So if you do have customers using these softwares, I would strongly recommend them to consider cloud and start making plans. You can just do a lift and shift of these applications from their on-prem to Azure, and you should be able to get the further security updates and patches for the next 3 years. The last question which I have for today is, now this is something that I've recently started receiving from a lot of customers. If your customer wants to move his file server onto a cloud hosted Windows server based file server, right? So yes, the very first recommendation I would always give my customer if they want to move file server is SharePoint or Dropbox, because it definitely provides you all the functionalities that you're looking for. But a lot of customers are used to the Windows Server or a Windows Explorer format of accessing data and accessing files and folders, and then then giving permissions on the folders. So recently I've received a lot of customers asking if Azure has an option where I can easily integrate or push my file server data onto, let's say, a Windows server, and still give it permission or still continue to use like I'm using it on-prem. The answer today is yes, you can do that, but currently the feature is in preview, which means that the feature is already available for testing, but you would need to wait some more time to actually put it to production. So Microsoft recently has announced that you can potentially use Windows-based Active Directory integrate that with Azure File Storage. Azure File Storage is something like a file server as a service or file storage as a service functionality by Azure. Before this feature announcement, you could only integrate Azure File Storage with Azure Active Directory domain services, right? But now Microsoft has developed this feature where a traditional normal Windows Active Directory or a machine which is joined to the Windows Active Directory domain can actually access the files which are stored on Azure File Storage, and you can give it permissions. You can give it access control permissions on these folders so that they only get access to the data that they have been given to. And how do you sync or how do you move the data from your on-prem file server to Azure File Storage? Again, Microsoft has something called as Azure File Sync. You could use that to sync or move the data from your on-prem file server to Azure File Storage. So Microsoft has developed this very good feature. This has been a request that a lot of partners and customers have asked, and this feature is currently available in preview. You can implement and test it as of today. And it gives you a single sign-on experience because you're the authentication source is still Active Directory, right? So just to summarize, how do you identify Azure opportunities? All you need to do is ask these questions, right? You can have these questions as a sales battle card given to your sales folks, and whenever they visit your customers, just ask these 7 to 8 questions, and if the answer for some of them is yes and some of them are looking for these requirements, then you can straight away know that you can potentially go ahead and sell Azure to your customers. It can be new customers, it can be existing customers. So the next is the new program that Microsoft has announced. I wouldn't say it's a new program, it's been an existing program, but we want to make sure our partners are aware of it. So I'd like to invite Sylvia from Microsoft to take over the mic and give us an introduction about this particular program. Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you, Roshan, and thank you for everyone and their patience. I know there's a lot of content that we've been sharing today, so I promise I will try to get through the slides and give as much information as possible. But I'm also happy for anyone to connect with me post today's call via LinkedIn, or even if Roshan wants to pass over my details, happy to assist. So a little bit about Fast Track for Azure. It's actually 2 years old now. I'm trying to head off to the next slide. Thanks, guys. So it's about 2 years old, and essentially we are part of our engineering organization, And we've developed a program to be a customer success program, not just for organizations that, are deploying cloud projects or, moving from on-prem to cloud, but also for our partners who are supporting customers to do that. And so we decided that we would tailor a program to assist both, but with some caveats behind that. And essentially, our charter is customer success. So how do we do that? How do we develop a program where we can meet the needs of our customers, but also share knowledge, transfer that knowledge between customers to make sure that they're confident in Azure, but also to our partners? And how do we support our partners become confident and grow their skill sets, but also partner with FastTrack to build their business? So customers and partners but they benefit through direct assistance with our engineers. And as we can see here on the screen is, we help you develop your solutions and accelerate the development of those solutions through this advisory and mentoring service. So we provide assistance and mentoring in either the discovery phase or that solution enablement piece, but also through that deployment piece. Having said that, I would like to also let everyone know that FastTrack for Azure is also part of our product management group, and I'll talk more at the end of what that means for customers and partners and how that aligns with our charter of customer success and helping our customers and our partners achieve what they need in the cloud, but then also make sure you're profitable. This is also a free program. So what we're asking for our customers and partners to look out for when they nominate to be part of FastTrack for Azure is these key 4 pointers here, right? So we're looking at customers that have an Azure subscription and that are in a supported region. And just to confirm, I didn't post the slide here of what those supported regions are. I can tell you that we are a global organization, and for the purpose of today's call, the supported regions we're looking at is Australia, New Zealand, but also we do have APAC presence. Right now we're in Singapore, and we are looking at a pilot right now in India, and that's still in preview. But then we just launched Japan, and we have plans for other services or other countries such as China and Korea. But right now, for this supported region, it's Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. Oh, I'm so sorry. Singapore, but then also, as I mentioned, Japan. I'm just going to put myself on mute for one moment. Thanks, guys. Apologise for that. But we're looking at customers and partners who have identified projects in using FastTrack and our support mechanisms that these projects are looking at consuming over 5K a month within 12 months of deployment. So what that means is if you have an opportunity where there's a customer spending $20,000 already on Azure and they want to build some apps or move some apps on-prem to Azure, we're still going to support that. We just had to put a number in place to say, look, what are the kinds of projects that we would accept into the program? So even if you have a customer that's only consuming about 3,000 in cloud services, but then they have a project, whether it be modernization or data and an AI project, as long as their consumption will move into the 5K range a month within 12 months of working with us and yourself, they would be great candidates for FastTrack. I talk a little bit about what's in scope and out of scope because this really helps everyone understand the scope of where we work with customers and partners. And really, because this is a free service, we had to put some mechanisms in place to say where we could engage. But then some of this stuff is also privacy, right? So I'm going to focus a little bit about the out of scope first. What we can't help our customers and partners is when they're in that early stage of, before they've decided that they're going to work on a project. So if they're in discussions with regards to licensing, or just deciding whether or not they're even going to work on something. We can't be engaged at that point. We don't go in and write code or scripting for customers. We can deliver, mentoring, via Teams in this kind of charter online, where we can support whilst they're doing that. I have engineers who have helped their customers whilst they're writing PowerShell, giving them some guidance. We can't develop your architectural designs for your customers or turn anything on in their subscription, or take control during any of these engagement sessions, and we don't provide guidance for M365. And the reason why we don't do that is we do have a fit-for-purpose team, fast track for Microsoft 365. So at any point, myself or your engineer can always direct you to the right point of contact if it comes to that point for that out of scope. But in terms of what's in scope, we absolutely help our customers and our partners work through solution designs. We talk to that best practice and look at the current state, but also future state, and help your teams work out what's the best foot forward. We have those discussions in terms of cost optimization, giving more of that technical and operational guidance. We also share a lot of our templatized codes and script, but we make sure that they're publicly available. Because you're working with engineering, we are the people who put together these scripts, and we're adding all these documents and codes through our online repository so that everyone has access to. We're doing that daily. We also can provide insights into proof of concept work, and particularly in the data and AI space, we're doing a lot of POC work because we're still working with a lot of emerging technologies, and we want to work with our partners who are working with customers to do that, because we're all learning and all getting those insights. Now, that brings me to the last point of what's in scope, and what we get back from our customers and partners from having a fast track engagement. What we're getting is that customer experience so that we can provide that feedback through to our back channels, such as our product groups. So at the moment, our partners are working with our OCP teams for a lot of giving a lot of feedback, some pre-sale support. You can work with Fast Track with that, but we're also tapping into our product groups. So when you log a feature request, if you do it with Fast Track, with a Fast Track engagement, you're directly working with the people who are tapping into the product groups and who can get your feature out there a lot sooner. And that's why we figured out that. Hello? Rashan, I just realized I was on mute. Could you share with me what was the last point we were speaking about? Because
we could hear you till the last couple of seconds, so you were not on mute. We could hear everything.
Okay, so did everyone hear where I was talking about the customer experience and the feedback?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're connected to that group, and any engagement that you're working with, absolutely, we connect to our product groups to get those enhancements a lot sooner. So moving to the next slide. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on the next couple of slides. They're very visual, but I did talk to that in more of the out of scope and in scope. Where we see a fastback engagement really work well when we're working with our partners is in that plan and guide stage and that build and test, where we're talking about the strategy that you're talking to your customers about on what they're looking at implementing, but then we help you design and work towards that enablement piece where you're actually implementing on those plans and what we've talked about in the discovery phase. And we are side by side with you to help you get to that point where you're deploying, but we don't, as I mentioned, we don't actually deploy for you, but we're there to help remove any of those technical blockers that you might have to get to that deploy piece. So we're there with you through to when you're deployed into production, and then we end the engagement. So the next slide really is just another indication of and more in depth of at what stage do we engage and what are some of the expectations of the activities that we're going to do with you. Once you nominate, we align with the partner, we have a discussion with you, and we would also ask if the customer wants to be involved, because we want to be able to support you and the customer and let them know that they're partnering not just with you, but with Microsoft themselves, and that we are there to support you as the partner. And that is really awesome for a lot of customers. They love it. They want to know that you've got the backing of Microsoft. So through these joint activities between ourselves and yourselves, this is a huge impact for customers. And whilst they're moving to the cloud, they just feel a sense of relief. But as we can see here on the screen, we've got the guiding and architecting and helping you build those plans and helping you get that sign off from the customer so that you guys can do that work to build and deploy. But we will always check in and set up cadence calls with yourself and the partners to make sure that we're meeting your needs and also the customer's needs. So essentially what we're working with here is hoping our customers can become more profitable through partnering with Fast Track, giving you access to information and key learnings before you get them through OCP or through your other learning channels so that you can get your customers faster to market. And we would hope that this then brings us more projects where you and our customers will work together so that we can continue the momentum of projects and getting that customer feedback, so that we can continue building out programs and offerings to help you sell the value of Azure, but also help us build that feedback forum. So what we're asking is if partners look to engage with Microsoft, that you would nominate, and we can do that through this URL here. But we'd ask that you would evaluate the customer and understand what their environment looks like, so that when you do nominate, we do have a bit more of an idea of what you're looking to achieve and how we can build out an engagement that's going to be smooth sailing for us all, but then add the greatest value for yourself and the customer. And that's all from me today.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for that introduction about the Fast Track for Azure program. Folks, this brings us to the end of today's session. Now I'll open the window for any questions. If you have, feel free to go ahead and post your questions on the chat window. If you don't have any questions, then thank you very much for taking out time and attending today's session. I hope it was helpful and informative. I hope you got ideas of how you can go back to your existing customers and ask a few questions and see what kind of Azure opportunities you can discover. So if you do have questions, I will be available online for the next couple of minutes to take up your questions and answer them if you have any. But if not, thank you very much for your time, and have a great day ahead.
Hey, Roshan, we've got a few questions coming through, and I'll read them out to you.
Okay.
The first one is, does Veeam Backup work with Office 365 home subscriptions?
Yes, it does.
Right, easy. Next one is, when will WVD be available in Australia?
It's already available. It's been available from December 2019 onwards.
All right. Next one is Fast Track a startup help program, and that $5,000 per month is free credit?
It's not a startup program. Only if you have an opportunity which where the overall consumption is approximately $5,000 per month, then we could utilize Microsoft Fast Track folks to help us with architecture design, talking to the customer about various solutions and features and things like this.
Okay, next one is, does Ingram Micro offer professional services to help migrate workload to Azure?
Yes, Ingram Micro has a dedicated Center of Excellence team, a team of solution architects and consultants and engineers who can help them with any migration of on-prem to Azure or develop a solution on Azure.
All right, I think that's it. We do have a question about accessing the recording of this webinar. So Roshan, you'll be sending out after the
Yes,
webinar, is that right?
yes. All the people who attended and have registered for the session will get the slides and the recording of today's session.
All right, that's all the questions we've got.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ashna, for scheduling this session. Thank you, Sylvia, for taking out time and joining us today. And yeah, if there are any further questions on Fast Track, I'll pass it across to you, and we can take it ahead from there.